So my name is Sonia Ellis, and I'm a writer for the project Through My Window, and I was the author of Talk to Me, the first book that was written for the project, and now I'm working on Finding Sorrow, which is the second book. Glenn realized that in middle school there were a lot of girls really getting, research was showing that there were a lot of girls who were really getting disengaged from engineering and the idea that they could be an engineer. And he also got involved with Al Rudnitsky in the Smith Education Department. And they came up with the idea that a really cool way to reach these kids, and particularly the girls, would be, because Al had done a lot of research on the power of story and narrative, that would be a really cool way, an engaging way to reach kids of that age. And Glenn, knowing that I was a writer, came up with this idea of let's have a fiction story for these girls. And so that's how I got drawn into the project, because I was already a writer at that point, plus had a background in engineering too. So it was kind of a natural fit at that point. The principles of it, of what attracts kids when they read, the idea of the extremes and the heroes and heroines, all that stuff really informed the writing of Talk to Me in a big way. So that the theory and the research and the understanding about how people learn and how kids learn definitely came before the writing of the book, and really had a lot to do with how it was written and what kind of plot elements we wanted to put in. I have a master's in chemical engineering, well, bachelor's in chemical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's from Princeton, and then turned around and became a writer, so. But yes, it's there. I grew up in a family where engineering was, at least the academic side of engineering. My father is a professor of chemical engineering. My older sister went into engineering, so it was something that was really known and understood and talked about in my house growing up. Definitely the fact of family history, because I mean, it's not like we sat around the dinner table every night talking about engineering, but it was close. It was always a part of my life. I mean, even when I was just a kid, my father would take me into University of Pennsylvania, you know, and I'd sit in on his classes once in a while, and I'd be there in his office. So to me, engineering was more the academic side of it, and not so much the out in the field side of it. I went into engineering not really having any understanding of what it was about, which is, I think, what led to the fact that I eventually left engineering. If I'd had a less traditional education and had more of an understanding of what engineers can really do, I think I would have stuck with it. But writing was a passion of mine as well, so that kind of contributed also. Glenn was actually teaching up at Clarkson University in upstate New York, and I had a job working in a lab there, but I heard about, there was this center that was being developed, their Center for Advanced Materials Processing. They needed a writer, and I thought, well, it would be interesting. They just want to try to start a newsletter. So I went over there with no official formal writing background whatsoever, and I had one of those people in my life, two actually at that time, which if you get that, you're so lucky. Mentors, really. This person who was part of the center took a chance on me and said, hey, well, you have an engineering background, let's try it, do it. And he was so willing to work with me, and we had a person who was an editor at Clarkson University, and she mentored me and told me a lot about story structure, about, you know, circling back at the end of the story to things that you had introduced in the beginning, and she was really amazing. So I was so incredibly lucky to have two mentors there. They just took a chance on me, with having absolutely no reason to believe I could do this. And so I learned on the job. I learned writing on the job, and that's the way it's been for me from the beginning. I just read constantly about writing for fun, and I think that's how you know that you really love something. You know, you'll just pick up a magazine or a book and just read about it for fun, and that's what I do with writing all the time. We had so many brainstorming meetings where people threw thoughts out and ideas, and we tried to think about, if this was going to be used in after-school programs, what would be the things that the kids and teachers would want, plus what did we have available experts on, you know, to guide us through. So that's how we ended up with the artificial intelligence. Of course, the engineering design cycle being fundamental to engineering. and all of us being fascinated by the idea of engineering ethics. So maybe other than engineering design cycle, not super traditional things that you'd think about with AI and with ethics, but definitely things that have engineering elements. So we had so many brainstorming sessions where we threw ideas in and we threw ideas out, and it was a lot of fun. Those were really kind of energizing meetings. And they gave me, again, I was lucky, they gave me a lot of trust. I mean, I was writing off of an outline, and they had a lot of faith in me to bring these elements in, but we did talk about them all along the way. You know, what did it mean to bring AI into the book, and what would be good starting points then to use that to go into the classroom. But what made it, am I going on too much?
No, I love it.
Okay. What made it so interesting for me was because they gave me a lot of free rein about how I would bring that into the book. It was never meant to be a textbook of any sort. And so for me to have that kind of ability to say, well, oh, you have to include these elements in the book, but it didn't feel restrictive ever. It felt like, you know, here are the reins, go, take it, you know, run off with it and see what you can do to make this engaging to middle schoolers. I mean, what could be more fun than that? Not in the plot of the book, more in the characters. One of the characters that I don't talk about as much is Mr. Jaworski, the teacher. He was actually based on someone who was involved in the project at that time. Rio, a lot like my son. I think both Monica and Sedina definitely have elements of me in them. I guess it was less in the plot and more in character personalities and reactions and that kind of thing, because I would think a lot. I would try to put myself in the head of Sedina or whatever character and think a lot about how they would react to things. And so inevitably there was a little bit of that in how I would react to things as well, yeah. I love writing for this age group because I love interacting with this age group. I think kids in the middle school range, a little younger, a little older, that whole range, they're amazing. They say things right out when you talk to them about the book. They don't hold back at all. They're wonderful. They're just so engaged. They love to, and they have the greatest questions when I talk to them. Often, if I'll do an author visit that has nothing to do with the book, like one of them asked, "How big is your house?" And not only what year I was born, but also how old I was. They asked what year I was born, and then they were very delighted that they'd calculated my age correctly, so I thought that was really cute. And they just want to hear about your dogs and your pets and your kids. They want to know you as a person, which is really cool. But yes, I love this age group. I think they're so ready to learn and take in new ideas and express their own. Yes. So in this case, in this book, the topics we want to have include bioengineering, construction, flight, and knowledge building. And I have to tell you, this has been a gigantic challenge for me to bring all of these in. I think more so than the first book, because the first book, it was all new. And now I'm trying to recreate not recreate a world, but create an entire new world with new topics in a very different way, something that's a little edgier, something that's for a slightly older age group. So I can't look back and say, hey, I did this once, I know I can do it again. I guess what I'm trying to say is having done the first novel doesn't mean doing the second novel is easy. I think that's what I'm trying to say here, is that the topics are a little more challenging to bring together in one plot and to pull them all into plot that makes sense. But we're getting there. So again, it's gone back to the fact of I've spoken with a lot of different professors, a lot of different students. There was a student on the project who was just doing research on things for me for this book, which was extremely helpful. So I did manage to come up with the high-level outline, but I will tell you, it's changing as I go constantly. And that's different than the first book. The first book I kind of worked out the entire plot and the writing was very straightforward. And now I'm really finding the story is constantly growing, stretching, being pulled back in other areas. The characters already have undergone a lot of changes from what I started with. So that's been interesting and challenging for me. I'm used to things proceeding a certain way and at a certain pace, and this book has been very different for me, a very different experience. we talk to kids and we talk to teachers about that, because one thing we found is a lot of the demographics of kids, I mean, they experience things in their life that are, sure, some have more sheltered lives, some, it might be a little scary, it might be a little edgy for them, but a large demographic of kids, they go through a lot of tough times in their life, and for them, having relatable characters where things aren't just all very easy for them and simple and they have a neat little nuclear family. No, I mean, that's not realistic. That's not the life a lot of these kids have. And so we talked to the kids and we talked to the teachers, and we came to understand, you know, for a lot of them, they'll identify with some of these things and they'll make the characters more relatable. So I think in the end, also the kids are very resilient and they like to explore things in their minds, and the ideas of different characters and different lifestyles is interesting and engaging to them, I think. It's happened multiple times that I have had a kid, and it's both girls and boys who have come up to me and said, I just wanted to say one thing to you, that I really, really love this book. And to me, that's it right there, that moment where you know there's been this one kid who cared enough and enjoyed enough or got something out of it in some way that it was important to them to come up to me and tell me that. I really treasure that. It's that connection we make in that one moment that, you know, I've created something and that child has entered that world. That's really a cool moment that we kind of share that connection. That's the thing I really treasure, yeah. Actually, very recently we did actually learn something like that. Talk to Me was chosen for the One Book, One School at the Clunan Middle School in Stamford, Connecticut, and I went down there and visited the kids and talked to them, and we talked to one of their teachers who runs an after-school robotics computer program, and he told us that after the kids had read the book in the summer, attendance in his club actually was much higher that fall than it had ever been. And we actually had one of the students directly tell us that she went and joined that club because of the AI components and talked to me. So we're in the early stages of research, and I don't have tons of stories like that, but that was real evidence right there that something was happening, something good and interesting was happening. Kids were thinking more about things and what they felt themselves capable of doing, or different things that they might be interested in because of the book. So that's pretty amazing. I think it would be amazing if we've had this kind of view it as kind of an organic growth of this book. It's not like it's this overnight sensation on, you know, Amazon or whatever. And we never viewed it that way. We never thought of it happening that way. It's just kind of a word of mouth organic thing. And I love, love, love to see that keep happening, that we have more and more after school programs that start to see the potential here for kids and use the book and use the website and just see that spread not just in Massachusetts, but Connecticut, New England, and then gradually across the country. That would be amazing, because it would mean more and more kids would get the idea that engineering is something they can do. Yeah. Well, there are bigger obstacles. I said earlier that one of the cool things about writing Talk to Me was that I was given a lot of free rein in what the plot of the book was going to be. And in a sense now that has almost become a struggle in the second book, because it's a big world out there, and the world of what are the limits? When we talk about the topics that we want to include in the book, we think a lot about kind of those imaginative education ideas of extremes of reality and heroes and heroines. So when you look at each of those topics, that's the kind of thing you want to think about. What are the limits right now in bioengineering? What are the extremes? What are the exciting things? And it turns out in a lot of these worlds, there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on, and how do you decide which of those topics you're going to include in the book. What are good jumping off points then for teachers to use in the classroom or to use it or informal education? And it's tough to choose sometimes and to narrow down the things that are really going to work and work with these characters and work in this plot. And that's on a big level. So then on a smaller scale level, this thing called writer's block, which some writers think is real and others don't, and they're the lucky ones. But I do have fixes for that. It does happen to me where I sit down and I have no idea where to go with things. A word isn't just a word, a sentence is just not coming to me, nothing's happening. I have to keep writing. So I have fixes for that, which is I need to move. And if I'm at home, I walk, and we have a house where there's a big center chimney and all the rooms are kind of in a circle around it. So I walk in circles, like one room to the next on the outside of the house, and my 2 dogs, they trot after me the whole time. So that's kind of amusing. And so walking, moving are all good things. Okay, so some writers get writer's block, others don't. I'm one of the ones who does believe in it because it does happen to me where I just can't move forward. I'm stuck, I can't write another word, another sentence. So my solution is I need to get up and away and move and see different things. So I like to walk, and that could be as simple as walking around in my house, just in a circle around the room to room in the house. But I like to really, really get outside. If the weather's good, I'll go and walk. Here on campus, I'll walk down along the trail along the river back and forth. That's a really good spot for me. I have fields and woods behind my own house. I walk out there a lot. I've done it. I've walked at the mall. I've walked, and driving is a really good thing for me. I'll just get in the car and go. And I find there's something about either walking or driving where it lets my mind just move. And I've had so many kind of revelations when I stop forcing myself to think about something, that suddenly I'll solve a plot point or I'll realize how I want to word something and how I move forward. So to me, it's a go-to solution that so far has not failed me. It always works. One thing that should be noted about Through My Window is the fact that, yes, so much of it, the contributions of undergraduates has been enormous, probably more than, almost any project you would have heard of. It's really extraordinary when you think about the number of students who have come through this project, and it's really cool. I mean, yes, I agree with you. I think there would be people who would say, why are you involving undergraduate students? What do they know? What could they really contribute? But the reality is, even students here who have come into the project and not really known a lot about imaginative education or engineering even. I mean, we're probably largely not engineers, right? A lot of the students are there's so many different majors, and I think that's the strength of it. I mean, you have, one interesting thing about Through My Window that I've really noticed is it seems to incite incredible passion in people, because we're doing something to try to help make the world a better place. We're trying to bring a different perspective, a female perspective to engineering, and encourage young women to understand this is something they can do, that they can have this identity, but also just to make young people in general aware of engineering. And I think we all get so passionate about this project. We've all made, for those of us who already have full-time jobs, have often made the comment that we wish we could just do this full-time. And I think for a lot of the students, there's been the attitude that they really wish they had more time to put into it. And so what I'm getting at is the fact that.
Sorry that I interrupted you.
No, it was a good thing to do. So where was I? Passion. The reason I make a point of that is because when students come on the project, it doesn't seem to take long before they really care about this. And it's amazing how quickly they immerse themselves and learn about the project, about the research that it's based on, and start to have really incredibly cool things to contribute. And I think the other reason it works so well is because, as a lot of them have noted, their contributions are valued. I think a lot of them feel like, hey, everybody on this project has an equal voice. And I think that's really exciting, to be able to sit around a table and realize that everyone can contribute their thoughts. And we have this expression that we use of starting your thought or idea by saying, I have a half-formed thought, and it kind of excuses you from having something that's completely fleshed out or having to present something that you're completely confident in. You can say, I have a half-formed thought that maybe this would be a neat way to go with the project, and it allows you to contribute things that otherwise you maybe would be too shy to contribute. And I think, so with those elements of having people who are undergraduates who are very passionate and also not afraid to contribute, you get some really wonderful, diverse and exciting ideas out of them. So that's a pretty cool part of the project.
Mm-hmm.
So I love writing, and I do it not just as a job, but as a hobby. I love to write short stories. I love to write poetry. I love to read about writing. I have a subscription to a writer's magazine, but I also love reading about science. I also have a subscription to a layperson's science magazine, which is Discover. And so I love reading about the brain and things that the brain is capable of. And so those are big interests. But also I have 2 dogs that I'm really crazily passionate about because, well, they have their own Facebook page. So, I'm a little crazy about that. But I love dogs, and I'd really like to get interested in fostering dogs. I feel a lot of concern and passion about the huge number of dogs that need homes. And so I'd like to get involved in that. Although I'm very much an amateur at a lot of these things, I love taking pictures, and I've kind of set myself a challenge of taking a picture a day for the month of December. So just trying to look for things that are different, not just conventional pictures, but just things that people normally don't notice. And not for any reason but other, just for pleasure, and just for the idea of it sets your mind to looking for things that are different in your environment. And I think it also helps my writing because I start to notice things more carefully. And I like to create things. I like to sew things, craft things, I guess, and build and create too, and spend time with my family. Family, we were book readers, and we read books around the dinner table. So we had these very quiet dinner table sessions where everybody was eating, but everybody also had a book tucked next to their plate. And it was a very sort of companionable thing because we were all doing something we loved together, and we would mention things out of the books that we were reading and stuff. But definitely was a very quiet kid growing up. And my sister and I always used to joke that the worst injuries we had to worry about were paper cuts because we weren't real athletic kids either.